Welcome to Chalk Talk, presented by Option Central, the premier source for all things option football. Now sit back and get your pencil and paper ready for some option football education with another Chalk Talk from Option Central.
Hi, this is Tony DeMeo, and I have a very, very special guest today. A very good friend of mine and a great, and I'm saying great, football coach. Coach Frank Lenti from Mount Carmel High School in Chicago. Frank, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Coach Tony. Thank you very much. Glad to spend some time with you today.
Well, you know, I would prefer that I was in Chicago and you could take me to Lou Malnati's for a little deep dish Chicago dish. I can't call it pizza because it's not really pizza. But that
it
deep
is
dish
really
stuff
pizza
that you have is really good. It's just not pizza.
It is really deep dish Chicago pizza. You're right about that.
Pizza you can pick up and eat and fold. That's something else entirely you have out there.
Coach, it's a meal in itself. You can get deep dish and you can get thin crust, which we can both fold up and eat away.
We've done that a few times.
Yes, we have.
Frank, you're the all-time winningest football coach in the history of Illinois high school football. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and it's due to having a lot of great kids, and most importantly, having a great staff of football coaches who are teachers first, and then teachers of the game of football and teachers of the game of life.
That's a great point. And just to catch our audience up a little bit, what's your lifetime record wins and losses?
Right now, I believe it's 357 wins, and I want to say 62 or 63 losses.
Wow. And how many state championships?
Well, in the time I've been the head coach, we've played in 16 in the last 30 years, and we've won 11 of those.
Incredible. Like the Yankees.
Yeah,
like a dynasty.
One year when we won the Class 8A state championship, we were the first private high school to do that a few years back. And Matt Bowen, who's a former Packer and TV commentator, that was the best compliment he paid us at the end of the game. He said, Mount Carmel High School football, the New York Yankees of Illinois high school football. And I thought that was cool.
That's awesome. That is about as good a compliment as you can get, because there's never been a franchise more successful longer than the New York Yankees. I mean, I'm a Yankee fan, and I know I'm prejudiced a little bit. I grew up 2 subway stops from Yankee Stadium, so I know I'm a little prejudiced, but you got to admit, I mean, they have put together so many strings of great teams. And I'll give you an interesting fact for you, Frank, and you'll really appreciate this. When the Yankees won 5 straight World Series from 1949 to 1953, they didn't have one player who led the American League in any statistical category. So that was the epitome of team.
You know what, Tony, and exactly, that's the true definition of team. And growing up as a kid, my favorite player was Mickey Mantle. In fact, when I was captain of the baseball team here, I wore number 7. My son, who played football and baseball here, wore number 7 as well. And it's interesting because in all of the time that we've played in those 16 state championship games in the last 30 years, and of course I've been the head coach for 32, we've never had a single player be the area's leading rusher, leading passer, leading interceptor, leading anything in any particular category, because it was the true definition of the team. And 1988, when we won the first of 4 state titles in a row, we were the last school to make Class 6A, and there were only 6 classes. So we were the smallest school in Class 6A. We beat 11-0, 12-0, 13-0 teams to go 14-0 ourselves. we did not have a single player get a visit to a Division I school.
Wow.
Our two best players went to Yale that year.
Wow, that's tremendous. That reminds me a lot of a coach, and I'm sure you've heard of this guy, Vinny O'Connor from St. Francis High School in New York City. And Vinny coached Jerry DiNardo, who's a good buddy of both of us.
Right.
And Vinny, one year, beat Bayside High School 24-10, and Bayside High School had three players, the Harmon brothers and Covington, who all played in the NFL.
Wow.
In the same backfield. And St. Francis won, running the old Bobby Dodd split T offense.
Yep.
He never changed.
Yep.
He was a legend. Okay, Frank, let's talk about, when we're talking about your offensive philosophy, you said you wanted to protect your defense and not put them in a bad situation. I think that's one of the keys to winning football games is to protect your defense at all times. Tell us how you do that with the split back veer and how that fits in.
You not only have to do it to help your defense, but your kicking game has to help as well. And our philosophy with the kicking game is you want to do one of two things. You either want to score points or you want to gain yardage for your team with the kicking game. Therefore, we want to keep the field tilted so our defense and offense can, as much as possible, whenever possible, play on a shorter field for us, long field for the other team. But the way we do it with our offense is we try and make sure that we can average 4 to 5 yards on first down so we don't put ourselves in a very predictable situation on second or third down. Goal being to shorten the game, eat up the clock, keep the other team's offense off of the field. And I always likened it to a couple of years ago, the first time ever we got to play in the Class 8A state championships here in Illinois. And here you have to understand in Illinois, because we're a private school without girls, first of all, they double our enrollment, which is fair because we don't have females. But after they double that enrollment, they take that number and multiply that times 1.65. So the way it works out, we're a school of a little over 700 boys, but we'll play against schools in the state playoffs with 5,000 or 6,000 students. So
Wow.
We don't have the facilities or we don't have the numbers, but still our youngsters find a way to be successful. But anyway, we were going to play a school called Neuqua Valley, and they had some tremendous athletes. In fact, their star receiver is playing at Illinois right now, and he was our kick returner, and we wanted to keep him off the field. Well, we ended up winning that game. I believe the score was 28-20 or 21. Two of our drives were 90-plus yards where we just ate up the clock and ate up the time, shortened the amount of time that they could have the ball. And, in fact, they were so concerned about stopping triple option football that 3 of our 4 scores came via the play-action pass.
Wow.
That's what the offense can do for you. But, again, as I said before, what we want to do is try and shorten the game. And it's a unique offense in that we run the split back veer. Our running backs line up with their heels at 4 to 4.5 yards from the line of scrimmage, and they're going to hit the line very quickly. And our quarterback does not have to be a great athlete. What he has to be is a great decision maker. We've had youngsters, go on and not even play quarterback in college or play another sport in college and end up leading us to state championship teams and state championship games because they were good or very, very good athletes who made great decisions. And we've even had youngsters who were very average athletes, but they were great decision makers with the ball. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't force pitches. Therefore, they did not put our defense on a short field, and they didn't make very many mistakes. And that's what really helped us to do a lot of really good things, particularly the last few years. when we won the 8A state championship, and then the following year we won the Class 7A state championship here in Illinois. But the goal
You had
is
a couple
to
of really good quarterbacks. Now you had Donovan McNabb, pretty fair quarterback.
Yep. Well, you know what? The interesting trivia question with Donovan McNabb, and people would say, well, sure, they're going to win state championships. You have Donovan McNabb. Donovan McNabb never started in a state championship game as our starting quarterback. He was the backup quarterback as a sophomore, and he was the personal protector on the punt team early on when we won the fourth of our 4 straight state title games. And then we had Jordan Lynch, who played at Northern Illinois. Yes. In fact, those two young men were both Heisman Trophy finalists, but neither of them ever started in a state championship game at quarterback for Mount Carmel High School.
Wow. And then, of course, you had Simeon Rice on defense, and he was quite a player.
Well, Simeon Rice was a senior when Donovan McNabb was a sophomore, and Simeon came to Mount Carmel as a running back, and the stories here are legendary. In fact, he was just honored here when he presented the school with the gold football for the 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl. But he loves to tell the story. He came here, he thought he was a running back, and eventually he just started growing and growing and growing. And I told him, I said, Sim, we're not going to have you play running back anymore. We're going to turn you into either a defensive lineman or a tight end. So his junior year, he kind of fought that all year long. So eventually we just told him, just sit on the bench. When you decide to do what we'd like you to do, then you're going to get to play. And he'll tell you to this day he still thinks he could play running back. But spring of his junior year, he came into my office and he said, Coach, he said, I don't care. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I just want to play. And the rest is history. His senior year, he was like a man possessed. In fact, we played 14 games that year. I think we had 7 or 8 shutouts that year. Now, again, that defense, Simeon Rice was about 6'3", about 215 at the time. Don Veronese, one of our DBs, was over 6 feet tall. Everybody else in the front 7 on our defense, they nicknamed themselves the Ninja Turtle defense. We didn't have anybody taller than 5'10", but they could run and they could hit you. But then Simeon, of course, it's legendary. I kind of convinced Lou Tepper to take him to Illinois, and he started as a true freshman at Illinois in the defensive line, having only played 1 year of defense ever. And he ended up being a newcomer of the year in the Big Ten, and I think he still holds most of Illinois' sack records. And I know he had some great years in the NFL, of course, winning the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we have had a few really good players, but we haven't had as many as people think. They think that every year we send guys to big-time Division I schools. That's just not true. In the time that I've been back here, the 32 years, because, of course, I'm a Carmel grad, 32 as a head coach, 34 total. I've never coached an offensive lineman, and I coach our O-line. I've never coached an offensive lineman who is 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds. We just don't have those kind of kids come to our school. Most of our offensive linemen are anywhere from 5'9", 5'10", to 6'1", 6'2", maybe occasionally 6'3". But they're very smart. They're very quick off the ball. I like to use the Coach Walsh analogy of beat them to the punch. Be like the boxer and be the hitter, not the hittee. So I think that that's very important as well.
What your teams, if you look at a Mount Carmel team, the word that comes to mind is execution. Your team executes well, and better than your opponents typically in every game. How many plays do you take into a game, and what are they?
Generally,
we'll start there.
Generally, depending on the quarterback and what the quarterback is capable of doing, we'll either feature the inside or the outside veer. We still run both, but one is going to be featured over the other. More often than not, the outside veer. Back in the early 2000s, we added the midline, but we don't use the midline if our quarterback isn't an exceptional runner or a very good runner. So some years we use the midline. Well, we use the zone dive. In fact, it's interesting. The zone dive is the number one play we teach because the blocking schemes and all other footwork come off of that. But it's probably the play we've run the least over the years. And then we run the dive option that looks like the veer. And then we run a counter dive and a counter option. We run a trap and a trap option and a draw. So those are a lead draw, really, that I got from Coach Holtz many years ago. Our offense is really a combination of Coach Holt's offense at Arkansas and Bill Yeoman's offense at Houston, and most of that was taught to me by our good friend Larry Zerline, who was one of the offensive line coaches at the University of Houston.
He was the first Glazier clinic ever was in Long Branch, New Jersey, and the three speakers were Larry Zerline, Tony DeMeo, and Terry Strock.
Yeah, yeah.
That was back, I think it was 1981 or 1983.
I think you have that wrong. I think that was 1918. I think you got those numbers. I think you got those numbers backwards, Coach.
Thanks, Frank. If I ever need a PR guy, I know right where to go. That's now the split. I stole the counter option, counter dive option, and counter dive from the split back veer. Only I called it flip option.
Right.
Because the tailback and the dive back flip assignment. So in the gun, when we went to the gun, we wanted to spread people out. So if we went twins right and we were in the gun, we couldn't run regular triple option to the left because we had no pitch back. So I went back and I did the counter. I stole the split back veer play and just called it flip option. And when I spent 3 days down at Mississippi State with Jackie Sherrill, and Jackie Sherrill said that I was running split back veer, not gun triple. I said, okay, you can call it whatever you want to call it, But so it's interesting how I kind of glom that into the
right.
triple offense. The other thing is one of my early influences in football was Homer Rice. That was like one of the first books. The two books I read early in my coaching career was the Split Line T by Jake Gaither and Homer Rice's Split Back Option Offense. And I've talked with Homer Rice numerous times, and but he gave me the idea that you could throw the ball and run the ball with balance in the split back veer. And so he was an early influence, and I know he was an influence on you too early in your career. Is that right?
Oh, exactly. In fact, the title of the book is Homer Rice on the Triple Option. That's the title of the book you're talking about, and you're absolutely right, because Homer Rice was the guy who really threw the ball with Greg Cook and ran the option out of a three-wide formation.
Right.
Today that seems to be very in vogue, and we were actually running a three-wide formation when I became the head coach back in 1984 and 1985, and then we'd go to a one-back formation, which I picked up from Coach Holt by just taking one of those backs and putting him in the weak side slot. So we were actually able to run four wides back in the mid-'80s, yet people consider us always just a run team, when in fact we're able to do a lot of those things. And you're right. I mean, Homer Rice, tremendously intelligent man. Someday it's still on my bucket list. I'd love to meet him and talk to him face to face. I've tried to read everything he has ever written about teaching, coaching, leadership, football, whatever the case might be. So you're right. Our number one formation is out of a three-wide, usually a flanker and a slot to the field, and tight end or another wide out to the backside. But we like to use a tight end so we don't have to interchange personnel too much. So based on his ability, we'll use either a tight end or another split end. But it's usually three wides. or a slot to the field, as you and I have talked about. And of course, you can't. I can't talk about option football without talking about Coach Holtz, because Lou Holtz, wrote his first book when he was at North Carolina State. Then he wrote one at Arkansas, and then when he was at Notre Dame, I got a chance to visit with Coach quite often. And
he offered you a job at Notre Dame, if I remember right. Didn't he?
back in 1989 and 1990, he did. I almost went with him in 1989. The timing just wasn't right. And in 1990, he was looking for a secondary coach, and I hadn't coached on defense in many years, so I just wasn't comfortable doing that. So I thought at that time better off to stay, right where I am. But if you had to pick one coach for one game to try and win it, I mean, Coach Holtz would be my pick, my guy to get the team ready for that one game. And again, Bo Schembechler, Bo took me under his wing, and I had worked camps for him when I was an assistant coach. And when I became the head coach, I called him and asked him if he'd spend some time with me when I came out to his clinic that year. And he had some Mount Carmel football players on his team, and then we had sent a couple there after I became the head coach. A couple of our kids picked Michigan. But the great thing was when I got there early that week, I sat down with Coach Hanlon and the other coaches, and Bo told me, he said, listen, meet me on the floor at Chrysler Arena after I'm done speaking on the last day of the clinic, which was a Saturday. And I did, and Bo in his gruff manner said, get your box lunch and follow me. So I was, yes, Coach, I will follow you. So we get in Bo's car, we drive over to the stadium, we go up in the elevator in the stadium, and we go into the press box, and who's sitting in the press box is Ara Parsegian.
Wow.
Coach Ara is there to watch practice that day. So Bo says, all right, sit down. You got some questions? Ask us the questions. So here I am. I could barely get my tongue moving. I was so enthralled with these two guys that I got to sit down and talk coaching and football with Bo Schembechler and Ara Parsegian. And the interesting thing was, and I'm glad Bo said it, because he asked me what offense. I know what defense you're going to run. You're going to run our defense. I said, yes, Coach, I am. It's what I've learned. What offense? I said, well, we're going to run the split back veer. Well, what offense is your school running now? I said, well, we're in a Rip and Liz power I offense, but I'm more comfortable running split back veer, spreading people out, because I think defensively it puts a defense in more of a stress position if I can spread you out, run the option, and throw play action pass. Somebody's going to be out of position somewhere, or somebody's got to be out of position through the numbers game. So I said, good. He said, as long as you have an idea what you're going to do, don't you dare let anybody talk you out of what you believe in.
That's awesome.
Which ended up being pretty prophetic, because when we came back and we started running that offense, people in our league all said to me, you can't run that offense in high school. You're going to get fired within 2 years. And I said, well, if I'm going to get fired within 2 years, we're going to go down doing what we believe in best. The irony of it is I'm the only head coach still coaching in our league. All the rest have left or have retired, and we're still running the split back veer.
That's a great story. Now, I'll tell you one thing. When I became head coach at Iona, I was the youngest head coach in the country, 1975, youngest head college coach in the country. And I had learned the wishbone from Darrell Royal. I spent 10 days at their spring practice learning the wishbone. And in 1973, but never got to use it because I coached as an assistant at Pace College up in upstate New York. And then and I coached defense there. So but the Giants trained there, Frank, so I learned the drop back passing game. So I had two offenses in my head: the wishbone, drop back passing game, opposite ends of the spectrum. Well, when I became the head coach, at Iona, the first year I didn't have a quarterback, and we just ran vanilla wishbone and played for the championship but didn't win it. The second year, I go to meet Homer Smith, who I got to know at press conferences that they held at the Meadowlands. So I went up to meet Homer Smith, who's an Army at the time. He was a great football coach. I mean,
Yep.
You probably met him or talked to him.
Yep, and talked to he and his daughter several times.
Yeah, great guy, great person. So I go up there, I drive up to Army to meet with him and talk about what I was going to do offensively. And I tell him, I said, Coach, I want to combine and run the wishbone, and I want to throw the drop back pass. And he looked at me, and now Homer Smith had done this. I know he did it with Greg Cook. So he looks at me, and he says, Tony, I think you're crazy. What? He said, I think you're crazy. He said, nobody could do that. So now I'm driving back to Iona. I'm saying, am I really crazy? Is this really impossible? Well, by him telling me that, well, guess what? I'm just stubborn as you are. I'm going to do it no matter what. And I did do it, and we wound up winning the conference championship that year and setting a lot of records. And the next year we went undefeated. And
Yep.
I've been balanced ever since. But an interesting thing, Frank, you hear about RPOs, run pass options. Well, the first RPO I ever knew was the dump pass out of the split back veer.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what we call it. We call it the dump pass. That's exactly what we call it, Coach, and I'll tell you.
Quarterback the option of throwing the dump or pitching it, or how do you run it?
Well, again, we can do it either way. We can do it either way. By the way we call it, if we were to call, for example, 332 dump, okay, our pitchback would come across and he would block the edge. He would block the end. Now we're going to throw the ball to either the inside receiver or the outside receiver. If we go to the single side, we can call 232. 2 tells our pitchback to stay in pitch phase. Now, if the weak side corner drops off to cover the dump route, we just release the ball and a little quick flip to the pitchback in pitch phase as a pass. If the corner stays home and our wideout can get past him and get in that hole, then we drill the ball into him on what we'd still consider a dump route, because he's going to attack that guy and make him think we're pitching the ball on his side. So we attack half the distance to the DB, drop our hips, show our hands, make him settle in to think we're gonna stock block him, and then when he reacts up, then we would run by him. If he stays back, then we'll release him. We'll throw the ball to either himself or to the pitch back in pitch phase, who now becomes really a swing back. It's just like a swing route. But along those lines, because you're mentioning those people, I don't think you can talk about option football in our area here without mentioning Coach Larry Beckish. He wrote a great book, 60 plus 40 equals option, and we've taken a lot of ideas from Coach Beckish. I've been to his home and visited with him. Just a tremendous friend, tremendous coach. He really is. He also, every place I speak, I always mention his book, I Believe. It's a great coaching manual. And I tell coaches, I give them Larry's cell number and tell them text him or call him. Everybody who joins my staff, I give them a copy of that book, and I also give them a copy of a little blue book called Wooden, A Lifetime of Observations by John Wooden and Steve Jameson. I actually got to meet Coach Wooden in his home a couple of years before he passed away. My sister Jeannie, who's the athletic director at DePaul University here in Chicago, is good friends with Ann Meyer, and they set that up for me to fly to Encino and get to see Coach in his home for a whole morning. So he's another guy who had a great influence. But when we talked about that.
Do you remember that? You sent me your notes from that meeting.
Yep. And, you know, when we talk about that, another guy who I think I felt had a great influence on my career, even though we never met him, was Paul Brown. And when I look at it, I studied Paul Brown, studied Blanton Collier, studied Chuck Knoll, met many times, got to sit down with Coach Bill Walsh, because as you know, I used to help run not only the Glazier clinics there in Chicago, but way before Glazier, there were the Medalist McGregor clinics. And one of my teachers here at Mount Carmel, also a basketball coach, started the Medalist McGregor clinics with guys like Al McGuire and Billy Packer and a bunch of those guys. They started out as basketball coaches or basketball clinics and morphed into football clinics. And I'd mentioned earlier, you know, now when I go back and think about it, I actually did get to meet Coach Rice, Homer Rice, one year when he spoke at a Medalist McGregor clinic here in Chicago. But just so many guys. Jerry Hamlin, I coach our offensive line. I learned most of my offensive line play from Coach Hamlin, from Bill Callahan, who's been, of course, in college and the NFL. He and I are second cousins. Our mothers are first cousins. And Billy is really the first guy that taught me the drop back passing game, which he was using when he was learning it from Mike White down at the University of Illinois. So I've been very fortunate to have studied and been around a lot of really great coaches, and including yourself and, of course, our good friend Jerry Kill as well.
Oh, yeah, Jerry Kill.
I mean, he's aces to me. He's the best.
Well, we had you had a very strong influence on me as well, you know, because we used to do those clinics together, and Jerry Kill was one of our group that we used to hang out and just talk football. And you know, I used to get a lot of stuff from just hanging around with, you know, we used to just sit around and talk up at the when Frank Glazier, may rest in peace, who was a great split back veer coach. We used to have the hospitality rooms. We used to just sit up there and have a sandwich and a couple of adult beverages and just sit there and talk football for basically the whole night. And that was those were great sessions.
Those were clinics within the clinics. And when I first started out coaching, I heard Eric Persigan and Tom Pay speak here in Chicago at one of those Medalist McGregor clinics, and I was a young coach. And Coach Pagner was talking about the wing tee, and then he invited some coaches up to his suite to talk about it some more. And I actually followed those guys up there, took down notes, wrote things down. He actually sent me some film of Notre Dame to watch, and then I drove it back to the university, just kind of as a young guy, you know, becoming a football junkie. And as you know, Coach, if you're going to be good at this game, you know, you have to be good as a teacher. You know, I think the number one problem with too many young coaches today is, first of all, they want to move up the ladder without putting their time and their effort or paying their dues. And second of all, you know, they become scheme guys rather than people guys. You know, it doesn't matter what scheme you run. You have to be able to disseminate that information, teach it to your youngsters, and then take advantage of what your youngsters do well. One of the talks I used to give on when I talked about our split bag veer, I called it segmenting the offense. And basically what that meant was we were going to take the parts of our split bag veer offense that our quarterback was able to operate well, execute well, and execute with efficiency. Because as you mentioned a while back in our conversation, the whole offense, in fact, all offenses should really revolve around effort and execution. And if your players can't execute it, if they don't understand it, then find another way to teach it or find another venue that's going to give you a chance to be successful. And I love our offense because, again, coaching the offensive line, I want to make life as simple as I can for those kids. I want them to be able to come off the ball, beat people to the punch, and just kind of try and grind them up whenever we can. And I think if you can teach kids, okay, your blocking assignments are versus an offense or a defense that's an even front, an odd front, or a combination of the two, you know, then they can come off the ball and play. And you don't have to worry about long assignment sheets every week that are going to change your techniques and change your schemes. I think the term we always like to use was be brilliant on the basics. I think that's what's really important.
Well, I talk about banked reps all the time, and the thing about the thing about what you've done with the split back veer and what I've done with my offense is that I can adapt to the talent available.
Right,
and
right.
Change the whole offense. So in other words, like say you have a passing quarterback, well, you can just emphasize that area of your offense more with the passing quarterback without changing the whole offense. And what that does is your offense, because you have a passing quarterback, you don't have to. I know guys that have passing quarterbacks that all of a sudden go to the spread. Well, that means your offensive line has no banked reps in the new offense.
Right.
Where if you have a flexible offense like the split back veer or the triple gun, well, they're still going to do the same stuff. We're just going to throw more passes out of our existing offense. So we don't need those banked reps.
Coach, our number one example of that is 1996. We had a quarterback by the name of Jeff Welsh who could really bring it. He was a very average runner, but he could throw the heck out of the ball. In fact, ended up playing quarterback for Bill Cubitt and Gary Darnell at Western Michigan. Jeff's senior year, Coach, we went 14-0. Now, we had 85 kids on that particular team. 85 kids got to play in 11 of 14 games.
Wow.
That's how good we were. And believe me, we have some kids who are on this team, down that team, they wouldn't hit the water if they fell out of the boat. They just wanted to be on a good football team. So anyway, Jeff's senior year, we have two running backs who both rushed for over 1,000 yards. Jeff threw for almost 2,000 yards. He had 27 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions that year. Most of the year, we averaged 8.1 yards a snap on off. We finished the year averaging 7.9 yards a snap, run pass combined on offense that year. And most years we're over 5 yards plus 5.4, 5.6, 5.7. Most years with our offense anyway. But that year we finished the year 7.9 yards a snap on offense, run pass combined, with a quarterback who I would still to this day consider a passer first. But Jeff was, as I said, Jeff was a very average runner. I told him, Jeff, you run for first downs. Let the running backs run for touchdowns. Just be a great decision maker. And he was. In fact, he started one game the previous year when his older brother was injured. So Jeff finished his career 15-0 as a starting quarterback here at Mount Carmel High School.
Wow. Well, that's a perfect example of what I'm saying, adapting to your talent.
Right.
My first year at Charleston, we had a kid who had never run option. He's 6'4", about 220, and I wouldn't say he was slow, but he raced a pregnant lady, came in third. and we wound up having the biggest turnaround in conference history with that kid playing quarterback, and I used to tell him, make the pitch key play you and pitch it. It was give or pitch, basically. And he did a great job because he was a smart kid, and he was tough as nails. Ended up going 8-3 that year. But I've seen you do that with a lot of kids where you adapt them. And you talk about having kids that aren't very fast but can run the play. Lou Holtz's first quarterback at North Carolina State, the Bucky kid, was a 5.40 40.
Yep.
Remember? I mean, he was a little guy that could just read the thing and do what he had to do.
Right.
And that's what's great about an option offense is that you can take that kid and he can be a productive kid in the offense. Now, before we close, I got to tell people that you gave me one of the rules in my book, Common Sense Rules for Everyday Leaders, the reset rule, because
Yes.
you said to me that a kid couldn't. There's no reset button in real life. that really struck me.
Well, yes. I mean, I would tell the college coaches when they came into the office, the problem today is too many kids think that real football is like the football games they play on their laptops or on their phones or on their computers. And on those games, when they start to lose, they just press reset. On Friday and Saturday, there is no reset. If you're down 14-0, you have to have the character and the fortitude and the physical and mental toughness to overcome that. There is no reset to an earlier or easier form of the game. That's the reset rule. And again, too many people today and too many youngsters today are living in that reset rule. As we all know, Coach, we all grew up under earned and deserved. Too many kids today grew up under rights and privileges, or as I like to say, too many kids today were born on third base, but they think they hit a triple.
That's true. And not only that, like when now kids, they teach kids not to compete.
Right.
And when we were growing up, everything was competition. But where I grew up, they used to say on the playground, if you can't compete, take a seat.
Right. Yep.
That was it.
Well,
I mean, you couldn't play. You couldn't win. You sat down.
Right.
But
Exactly.
now we're worried about hurting people's feelings.
Feelings.
What feelings? What are you talking about? Hurting feelings? I had a parent tell me of not one of my players, but a neighbor, say that what she worried about Little League was her son. He took losing very hard. Now let me tell you something. When you were in Little League, nobody liked to lose, but I guarantee you, before you were home that night, you had already forgotten about it.
Right. You'd moved on. You moved on.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, kids don't take it as seriously as these adults are saying. But
right.
Yet,
exactly.
And also, let me tell you, there's a good lesson in you try your best. If you come up second best in that particular game, move on.
Right.
But if
right, Coach.
you never experience losing, how are you going to know what it is to win?
Right. You don't have the same exhilaration. Exactly.
Who's the pro football player that threw away his kid's participation trophy?
God, I don't know. I don't watch pro football.
Harrison, he took his kids his two sons got participation trophies for participating in Pop Warner, and he took them and he threw them away. And he said, you don't get trophies for participating. You get trophies for winning.
Right.
And everybody said he was a barbarian.
Yeah. No, he's just trying to teach his kids good life lessons.
Right. He's trying to teach his kids, that this is what you have to do, and you need a work ethic, and you need to work at it. And if you don't win today, and it's important to you, then you better work harder tomorrow.
Right. Exactly.
And those lessons, football, Frank, I believe, is the last bastion for teaching that.
I agree, Coach. I agree. Couldn't agree more.
Well, listen, this has been great. As always, it's fun talking to you. Frank is one of the great readers of all time, and is always, if you get a chance to visit Mount Carmel, I'm sure he'd let you watch him practice and whatnot. And is that true?
Yep. Anybody's always welcome. Just let us know you're coming. That's all. And you're right, Coach.
Great.
One thing we teach our kids: leaders are readers, and readers are leaders.
Awesome. I love that. Hey, listen, you be good, and if you ever get to New York, well, now I'm living in West Virginia, so I'm not going to include that in the pizza discussion.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
That's not into that. Someday I'd like you to take you to the Bronx for real pizza.
Okay, for the real pizza. I get it, quote unquote, right. The real pizza.
West Virginia. I told you my first year here on my radio show, somebody called in They said, Tony, I'm Italian, you're Italian. What do you think of the Italian food in West Virginia? And I said, well, I don't consider squirrel parmesan real Italian food.
Okay. All right. I get it.
Hey, listen, you be good.
Yes.
God bless. Have a wonderful Easter.
You too, Coach. Tell Joanne the family we said the same, please.
Hey, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Chalk Talk is a production of Option Central, the premier source for all things option football. Ready to improve your option football coaching skills? It's time to join OptionCentral.net right now.